Welcome everyone to the Sister Stories podcast. This podcast's aim is to marvel at God's sovereignty over each of our lives as women and to encourage one another by sharing our stories. My name is Sophie and today I'm joined by Emma.
Hello.
Welcome, Emma. First of all, can you tell us who you are?
So I'm Emma. I'm married to Steve. I've got 3 children, Kayla, Amelia and Nathan. I've been at Cornerstone for about 14 years now. I was a teacher for nearly 10 years, but left that job at Christmas and have just recently started working for the church.
Great. So we're going to be talking about your journey to faith and your walk with Christ. Could you tell us what your family background is and what it was like in your childhood?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in a Christian home. Both of my parents are Christians and both of their parents were Christians. So very blessed to come from a home that believed the Bible and brought us to church from the time that we were born. I'm one of 4. I've got 3 brothers. So church was always a big part of my childhood. Went along to Sunday school, learnt all the Bible stories and what they meant. Even did Sunday school tests, which they had in the church I grew up in. So my parents were great. They faithfully taught me who Jesus was from a very young age. So I don't actually really remember a time where I didn't know that God had made me. I didn't know. So I knew from a young age that I was a sinner who needed saving and that the only way to be saved was through Jesus' death on the cross. So those fundamentals I don't ever really remember not knowing. Which is down to my parents, really. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. So you grew up in Ireland, didn't you?
I did, yes. So Ireland is a predominantly Catholic country. So we went to a very small Baptist church with 20 members, but I was actually born in Derbyshire. And I remember, so when I moved when I was 5, and I think because I had that big significant move, I do have, it sort of stimulates memories. And I remember praying the prayer while still in Derbyshire. So I must have only been 3 or 4, so very young when I prayed that God would save me, thanking him for Jesus and knowing, you know, kind of confessing that I was a sinner and that I needed him. But I didn't have an understanding about the assurance that Christ can give about my salvation. So I was quite, I prayed that prayer lots and lots of times. So as a young child, both before I moved and after I moved, I remember sort of being awake at night and praying that prayer and being encouraged by my parents to talk to God about worries. And my mum would always say, you know, talk to the shepherd and count your blessings, and lots of little, you know, sound bites that still come to me now when I'm struggling, just encouragement to do that. So I do remember really trusting that God had saved me and was with me in everything, which did continue through life, but obviously in different ways.
I wonder why you were struggling with assurance in particular. Would you say there was maybe more of an emphasis on your sinfulness in your life?
Yeah,
and therefore,
possibly. Yeah. I think I just didn't have, it was obviously a very childlike faith. I knew that I needed to be saved, but I didn't have the full understanding about God's sovereignty and his character, that to kind of back that up, to give me that, you know, sure hope of heaven, that as a child of God I should have had.
Yes. And that's quite a hard thing to understand, even as an adult, isn't it? Yeah. So as a child, I can imagine potentially being a bit scared of God as well, that you could be feeling, oh, if I'm a sinner, then how can I approach this God?
Yeah,
really?
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's interesting. So we're going to follow your story along really and see how that developed into a stronger and closer relationship with God. Could you just carry on with the story? What happens next?
As I said, I grew up, so from age 5, lived in Ireland, which was Catholic. So at school, I was the kid who wasn't doing their first Holy Communion, who wasn't making their confirmation. So I was always different. Yeah. And as a young child in primary school, that didn't bother me that much because I was just very happy that they were all wrong. And that actually I was being taught what was right. But as I got older and into teenage years, I became much more self-conscious of being different, and wanted to fit in. So I just became quite quiet about what I believed and what my family believed and how that was different to the Catholic teachings. I knew my friends had an idea about God, and they all thought they were saved because that's what they taught. But they didn't have the right idea about being saved by grace. And I never really pointed that out to them. I just stayed quiet in that. And there wasn't any really, any young people at my church my age. There was a couple of families, but they then moved away when I was early teenage. So a youth group that I was going to, I then became completely uninterested in going because everybody was a couple of years younger than me. And that was really difficult. And so I continued to go to church with my family, but I think I sort of hid behind my parents a little bit. I was never with my peers within that setting of questioning what the Bible says and learning from it. So I wasn't very engaged as a teenager at all. And that mentality of just wanting to blend in with the crowd just sort of followed me into late teenage years and even into university, which looking back now, I now see as a terrible shame because it was a waste.
Yeah. Would you say that you still had interactions with other people at church, even if they were not your own age or young people?
Yeah, so we had, it was a lovely little church family, and I still, my parents still go to that same church now, and it's just, I was more seen as their child. I wasn't really my own person in my faith in that, and I didn't have the confidence to question the things that I didn't quite understand. I was very accepting that if that's what the adults told me, I was like, well, that is what's true, even if I didn't really understand why. So I wasn't really encouraged to grapple with anything in my teenage years. And I think that therefore didn't help me. But also I think I probably wasn't, a good listener when it came to sitting under the word. The sermons that were being preached were good, faithful Bible teaching, but it was aimed at adults when I was a teenager, and there was nothing really for me.
Yeah. That's quite difficult as a teenager, isn't it? Because you need that attention a little bit more at that time.
You do. And I just, the confidence to be able to say, well, actually, I'm not sure that is right. Even if I was wrong in my thinking, but just that encouragement to find out for myself a little bit.
Yeah. I can see having such a big Sunday school in Cornerstone, how great it is to actually see the kids, as I teach some of the lessons, just see the kids ask the questions and really try to understand the things that they are taught. So I think that's a massive blessing to have age groups that are appropriate and have that. And then as well to mix together as a church, because you have a good balance of a bit of both, really, which you need.
Yeah, and I think I see that throughout the life of Cornerstone, because even in, the Sunday school, the youth group, student group, and even as adults, we're encouraged to question, and we're encouraged to talk to each other and, what struck you, or what didn't you understand, or what is hard. And I didn't really have an experience of that until I came to Cornerstone. So that growing together as a church family was a new thing to me. When I came here.
Yeah, that's great. So what happened next when you came to university, and how was that?
Yeah, so I went to university in Edinburgh. So moved away from Ireland. So it was quite a long way away, so didn't get home that much. And sort of, again, I fell into just blending in with the crowd. Within my first week, I'd made friends with the people on my corridor, none of whom were Christians, all lovely people, but had completely different priorities. And I didn't then say, oh, well, I need to now go and find the CU and I need to go and get stuck into a church. I sort of just drifted along with them until I just slipped into the next few years of, living student life in a non-Christian way. So we were all, quite studious. We went to the library, but there was nothing, I used lots of excuses of, these are the people that I can invite to church one day when I eventually find one and get stuck in. So I did go sporadically, and I never really doubted what I'd been taught as a child. So I do think I still had that underlying faith, which in lots of ways is worse, because I didn't have a big wobble and think, oh, actually, what I've been taught is wrong. I knew that God was the creator God and that I was a sinner and was saved through grace. But I just sort of ignored it because it was easier, and I just went on that easy path. which looking back is a shame, because I do look back at my uni years and say, well, actually, that was a bit of a waste.
Were there any opportunities, though, where you had maybe some conversations with these people, or?
Yeah, so I definitely had some conversations, and I mean, like I said, I did go to a church sporadically. My cousin was also in Edinburgh, but at a different uni. We used to go along together, which sort of helped us hide in the back row a little bit. So we never got, stuck in or plugged into anything. The teaching at that church was very intellectual. So it was like going to another lecture. And it didn't speak to me. But again, that possibly was my heart and me not being a good listener. And it could have been incredible if I was in a different place. And my friends knew that I would have called myself a Christian. But again, that wasn't great because I wasn't living it out. So I was not a good witness to them, really, at uni.
That's hard, isn't it? Because it's hard to want to fit in and at the same time, be different, because, that's always a hard balance to strike, isn't it?
Yeah.
It strikes me how through these two church experiences, you didn't really have one group of people in the church that you felt close to. And I do wonder whether that didn't help you in getting stuck in the sense of like, actually, I know I can find a similar group of people in this church and just push you in that direction.
The church I grew up in Ireland, like I said, was very, very small. The church I went to on and off for 4 years in Edinburgh, and it really was on and off. It wasn't very regular. Was huge. It was probably 400 to 500 people.
Wow.
So it was complete stark contrast to each other. But neither one did I get stuck into the church family or have anybody who was going to call me out on any of the things I was doing or have any accountability with anybody.
Yeah, that's challenging, isn't it? So what changed then in your life? Because it feels like at this point you have an understanding, but you were lacking assurance, and then you're trying to almost avoid your faith in a sense, or just leave it aside. So what changed in your life and brought you
so
back
as I was coming
God?
Up to the end of university, obviously everybody's thinking about what you're going to do next. And I really just had, it was God working in me. And I guess showing that he is such a faithful God, even though we are so unfaithful to him. That I just realized I don't want to do this anymore. I want to change. I want to live for him. I know what I've been taught is true. I know the Bible's his word, and I know he doesn't like that I'm ignoring him in my life. So that was, and I used the opportunity of leaving university to say, okay, right, something's changing now. I'm not going to stay in Edinburgh. So I actually went back to Cork for a while. And my pastor there was great. He was really helpful. He met up with me each week and we read the Bible together. And I think there weren't any necessarily big new revelations at that time, but God was just working slowly in my heart to change my priorities and bring what I had been taught to life a little bit and giving me the desire to want to live that out a little bit more. So then after that, I did a few things. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I did psychology as a degree. I thought perhaps I'd go and do some further study in that, but needed some experience doing some kind of psychology, work experience. So while I was working out what area I might go into, my dad was involved with Radstock Ministry. So I went to Kosovo and Albania with him on a trip. And I then ended up getting a job in Kingston with a Christian holiday company. And it was just going to be an interim thing of my aunt and uncle lived in Kingston. My granny lived in Kingston. So I could move in with them for 6 months, work for this Christian holiday company. And then the following academic year, I would start further study. And I kind of just came here. But the first thing I wanted to do was find a church. And went to Dundonald once. And they sent me to Cornerstone, which was then Fairfield, because they said, what's the point in driving past a good church to come here? So, and that was great advice because Cornerstone was my local church. And I think within the first, few minutes of walking in, felt so welcome. And it was people my own age that were very real and wanted to get to know me. And it kind of just from there, everything just seemed to sort of slot into place. Suddenly I had preaching that was very dynamic and engaging and things that I had all that Bible knowledge there, and it all started to just be a lot more alive. Which was great.
Yeah, that's good to see how all these different churches and different influences were used by God to kind of make things almost click in your mind and just make things fall into place for you and just bringing you back to God in a sense after that uni experience. Great. So that's how you came to Cornerstone. It's about 14 years ago, you were saying?
Yeah, so it was the beginning of 2009. Wow. 14 years ago.
Feels like a long time.
It was, yeah.
And did you meet Steve at Cornerstone?
Yeah, so I met Steve at church. So very quickly felt very involved in the church family, which was great. Got involved in the youth work. And he was also a youth leader. So we just by default ended up started spending time together serving, which was great. And then we got married in 2011. So a couple of years later.
Great. Nice. Right. So I wonder whether we can move on to the things that you've learned, and especially perhaps more recently, but it could also be throughout your years as a Christian, really. Yeah. Anything in particular?
So, again and again, God has taught me that I am not in control of my own life. There've been lots of examples of that. When I was thinking about this, one of the things from the last year, so like I said, I've got 3 kids. Nathan's had some health issues, and it just becomes so clear that, I can't control what happens with my kids. God has made them. He is sovereign. He knows the plan that he has for them, and I need to put my trust in that. Yeah. So he had a couple of stays in hospital. He's got a metabolic thing where if he doesn't eat, he can get low blood sugar. So there's been a few instances over the last year where I've had to sort of put him down to sleep, knowing that he hasn't had enough to eat or drink. And that really is a sort of a testing thing of, what do I truly believe? And, I do believe that God has made him. God actually loves him more than I love him. God knows what's going to happen. So therefore I can trust my children over to God, that he will keep them safe, and, praying for that peace so that I can go and get some sleep. And God was really kind, and he has given me that. And even though it's trying times when you've got to deal with issues with your kids, it is amazing how God can sort of step in and remind you of those truths that he is in control, and we are not.
Yeah. And all that assurance that we were talking about earlier as well kicks in, doesn't it? Because now, it feels like through your journey, you've learned to really put your trust and know that your salvation is in him, and that's enough. That's sufficient, really. Yeah. So that's a beautiful thing, really. Yeah. Is there any advice that you'd like to pass on, perhaps to younger Christians or younger parents? Yeah. So I think if you are someone like me who is growing up in a Christian home, know that that's a privilege, but know that it's okay to question it and ask questions, and do that now. So if you are someone at Cornerstone, use the great kids work, youth work, student work, whatever, to do that, and get that good understanding now. And I would just say, don't drift and get stuck in, because if you are part of the church family and you are serving, then especially at Cornerstone, you will be held accountable for, things that you perhaps have in your life that you might need to be challenged on. And that's something I think that's really important that I perhaps didn't have at various stages of my life, that, maybe if they were there, or if I had let them be there, then it would have possibly been slightly different. But if you're about to go off to uni, that will be my biggest thing. If, in your first week, find the CU. In the first weekend, you need to have a church lined up that you're going to visit. And you can visit a few churches to see where is going to be suitable for you. But, have done that research and be ready, because if that's what you want to do at uni, if you want to live for Jesus, then you need help with that. And you therefore need Christian brothers and sisters around you. Don't do what I said of, I'll make friends of the people I can invite along to the church things that I'll find later.
which was just me giving myself excuses. So I think, just get stuck in at whatever stage you are. If you find actually life is too hard to have to try and live out as a Christian on your own. You need church family around you to encourage you and challenge you.
Yeah, that's a very good point, isn't it? And that's really important. And as we've seen, I mean, in Cornerstone, we're so blessed with such a diverse church family, and it would be a shame not to enjoy that and just get stuck in, really. But in any church as well, really. That's great. Thank you so much, Emma, for sharing your story with us today. And thank you everyone for listening. That's all for today's episode of Sister Stories, but join us again next time.